Part 1. The Invisible Cage. What if the reason the poor stay poor has nothing to do with money? What if it's something far more sinister, something psychological, philosophical, and invisible? What if the world was never designed for fairness, but for control? This video is not about economics, it's about power. And it begins with a truth Machiavelli knew centuries ago, one that still governs the lives of billions today. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking." But he wasn't just talking about kings and princes, he was talking about systems, about structures, about the invisible architecture of society. We are taught to believe that poverty is a material problem, but what if it's actually a psychological trap, a conditioning, an engineered illusion? Let's look at it plainly. Most of us are born into a pre-written script. If you're born poor, you're told to work hard, obey the rules, save money, and play it safe. You're told education is the key, but not the education of the soul or the mind. No. You're told to memorize facts, follow orders, and never question authority. And if you do all of this, you might escape. But even then, you're still not free. You've just moved to a bigger cage.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the dark truth. Poverty is not just about a lack of money. It's about a lack of power. And power, as Machiavelli understood, is never given. It is taken. The poor stay poor because they are conditioned to believe they have no right to power, no right to challenge the system, no right to rewrite the rules. They are trained not to think like rulers, but like servants. Ask yourself this: who benefits when you stay poor, not just financially, but mentally and spiritually? The deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just about economics. It's philosophical warfare. It's about keeping people obedient, predictable, manageable. Because a poor man who sees clearly is more dangerous than a rich man who is asleep. And so systems are built not just to limit wealth, but to limit vision. To keep your mind occupied with survival, so you never have the energy to rebel. Machiavelli also said, men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. And if you're poor, the system ensures you must live in fear. Fear of losing your job. Fear of eviction. Fear of being seen as lazy, ungrateful, or unworthy. This fear is not accidental, it is engineered. Because fear keeps you quiet. It keeps you compliant. It keeps you running in circles. Now consider this. What if the rules you've been told to follow were never meant to serve you but to control you? This is the moment many turn away, because this truth is not comfortable. It requires us to challenge everything we've been taught. But stay with it, because once you see the machinery behind the illusion, you can begin to escape it. Not just by making more money, but by reclaiming your mind. The poor don't just live in bad neighborhoods. They live in bad narratives. Narratives that say, don't dream too big, know your place, be realistic. These aren't just cultural sayings, they are psychological chains. And they begin early. In school, in media, in religion, in family. You are taught to internalize limits, to accept your ranking in the hierarchy. Let me ask you, when did you first start believing that your life was supposed to be small? This is where Machiavelli's darkness becomes useful, because while his truths are brutal, they are also liberating. He tells us power is not about morality, it's about strategy. And if you want to escape the cycle of poverty, you cannot rely on the morality of the system. You must outthink it, outsmart it, refuse to play the game by their rules. This doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming conscious. It means seeing the world not as you wish it were, but as it actually is. It means learning how power operates, how minds are shaped, how narratives are weaponized. Because once you understand that poverty is not just a financial issue, but a philosophical condition, you begin to see the real battlefield. We must ask deeper questions. Not just how do I make more money, but who told me what success looks like? Whose voice is shaping my aspirations? What am I afraid of losing if I choose to think differently? The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him, Machiavelli wrote. Now turn that inward. Look at your circle. What ideas surround you? Are you surrounded by people who challenge, inspire, and evolve with you? Or are you surrounded by fear, limitation, and conditioning? Because your environment is not neutral, it is programming you. At this point, the journey deepens. Because we are no longer just talking about money, we're talking about identity. Who are you when you strip away the labels? When you step outside the noise? When you stop believing what society says about you and start rediscovering your own voice? Here's a dangerous question. What if poverty isn't just your condition, but your comfort zone? This is not an accusation, it's an invitation. Because the truth is, many of us unconsciously cling to poverty because it's familiar, because it absolves us of responsibility, because it's easier to blame the system than to confront the terrifying possibility that we are more powerful than we've ever allowed ourselves to be. And power, real power, demands transformation. But transformation is painful. It requires shedding the skin of the old self. It requires solitude, discipline, and vision. It requires stepping into uncertainty. And uncertainty is the one thing the system trains you to fear the most. Because a man who embraces uncertainty cannot be controlled. Let me ask you, what part of you must die for the real you to be born? That's the question Machiavelli forces us to confront. Not because he was kind, but because he was real. He understood the brutality of power. But he also understood the potential of the individual. The poor stay poor not because they lack intelligence, but because they are never taught to think like strategists. They are taught to be moral, obedient, and humble, but never powerful. And so the cycle continues. Each generation inherits the same story, the same fears, the same psychological walls, until someone breaks the pattern. Until someone dares to ask, what if everything I've been told about life, success, and power is a lie? That's when the real war begins, not against the world, but within yourself. Between the conditioned self and the awakened self. Between the servant and the sovereign. Between the one who obeys and the one who designs. And once that battle begins, there is no going back. You start to see through the illusions. You start to question everything. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim the one resource more valuable than money, time, or connections, your mind. Because in the end, it's not wealth that makes the rich powerful, it's awareness. awareness of the rules, awareness of perception, awareness of psychology. And when you gain that awareness, the game changes. You don't just escape poverty, you outgrow it. There is a chilling brilliance in how the game is designed. Not only are the poor kept poor through external systems laws, wages, debt, but more dangerously, they are kept poor through internal narratives. The most effective prison is the one built within the mind. And the most obedient servants are those who believe they are free. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to be motivational. He wrote it to expose the raw mechanics of power. He understood something most people still don't. Perception is everything. If you can control how someone sees the world, you don't need to chain them. They will chain themselves. Poverty, then, is less about lack of opportunity and more about lack of perception. A trained blindness. Think about this. When you are poor in money, you are often poor in time, poor in networks, poor in mental energy. But worst of all, you may be poor in vision. You are taught to see only what's immediately in front of you: your bills, your debts, your obligations. Look deeper, and you'll realize this is by design. Because people focused on survival are too exhausted to rebel. The more sand has escaped from the hourglass of our life, the clearer we should see through it, Machiavelli said. But what if most people are never given that clarity? What if they are deliberately distracted, numbed, misinformed? The poor stay poor because they are taught to believe the ladder is real, even if it rests against the wrong wall. They are told to climb, not to question, to hustle, not to awaken. Let me ask you, when was the last time you stopped chasing and asked if the race was even worth running? This is the difference between the mind of the servant and the mind of the prince. The servant seeks approval. He wants to be liked, accepted, safe. The prince seeks strategy. He wants to understand the game, shape it, and if necessary, rewrite the rules. The servant waits for permission. The prince takes initiative. The servant survives. The prince designs. But here's the trap: many of us are taught to see the prince as evil. We're told power corrupts, that ambition is prideful, that wanting more is selfish. These beliefs are not spiritual truths, they are social tools designed to keep the masses docile. Because if you believe power is bad, you'll never claim it. You'll stay in your box, moral and miserable. Machiavelli knew morality could be weaponized. He wrote, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith, when by doing so it would be against his interests." This line shocks people. It sounds ruthless. But dig deeper, and you'll see the wisdom. In a world where systems are built on illusion, sometimes the only way to be truly moral is to stop playing by their fake rules. This doesn't mean becoming unethical. It means becoming aware. It means distinguishing between true morality, compassion, integrity, purpose, and social morality, which is often just obedience wrapped in virtue. The poor stay poor because they are taught that to question authority is wrong, that to desire more is greedy, that to seek power is dangerous. But the real danger is in never seeking your own liberation. Let's go even deeper. There is a psychological phenomenon called learned helplessness. It's when an individual or group, after repeated failures, stops trying even when success becomes possible. This is not just a personal issue. It is a collective condition. Entire communities, generations, cultures trained to believe they cannot rise. And once that belief is embedded, poverty is no longer just economic. It becomes existential. Ask yourself, have you ever stopped trying not because you failed, but because you were trained to expect failure? This is the cost of generational poverty, not just broken homes, but broken spirits. Not just underfunded schools, but underdeveloped identities. And here's the Machiavellian twist. Those in power benefit from this. They need the masses to remain predictable, to keep buying, to keep obeying, to keep fearing. Because once the poor start to think like princes, the structure crumbles. But here's the paradox. The path out of poverty is not more money. It's a new identity, a new internal architecture, one built on agency, not victimhood, on vision, not reaction, on strategy, not hope. The poor stay poor because they are taught to believe their external conditions define their internal potential. But the opposite is true. You must change the internal world first. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves, wrote Machiavelli. This is the formula for escaping poverty. Become both lion and fox, fierce enough to fight, clever enough to maneuver. You cannot be just kind. You must also be sharp. You cannot be just loyal. You must also be discerning. This is where the conversation turns. Because now we are not just discussing philosophy, we are discussing transformation. And transformation is not gentle. It requires death of the old self, the old beliefs, the old excuses. It requires you to confront your own comfort. To ask not just what's holding you back, but why you've allowed it to stay so long. Let me ask you, what identity are you clinging to that is keeping you poor, stuck, and small? The truth is, many of us become addicted to our struggle. We wear it like a badge. We find identity in it, and we bond with others through it. And in doing so, we unconsciously resist change. Because change means losing the story. And losing the story means facing the terrifying truth that you were always more powerful than you allowed yourself to believe. Machiavelli would say, use your circumstances or be used by them. The poor stay poor not because they lack tools, but because they lack permission. Not from society, but from themselves. They wait for the world to open a door. But the world is not in the business of opening doors. It is in the business of building walls. And it is your job to learn how to climb. Your mind is the first wall. Your beliefs are the first bars. And your silence is the first chain. But there is a way out. And it begins with a brutal but liberating truth. No one is coming to save you. Not the government. Not the schools. Not your boss. Not even luck. The only one who can save you is you, waking up. The first thing you must do is study power. Study psychology. Study strategy. Study those who rule not to become them, but to understand how they think. Because the greatest lie ever told is that power belongs only to the elite. Power belongs to the aware. And awareness is free, but it must be earned. You must become the architect of your own mind. Design your thoughts. Audit your beliefs. Choose your influences. Reprogram your rituals. Every day you are either reinforcing your poverty or building your power. Let me ask you, what would happen if, for the next 365 days, you lived as if you were your own king? That is the question Machiavelli would want you to ask. Not because he believed in fantasy, but because he believed in realism. He understood that the world is not fair, that people are not always kind, that systems are not built for your liberation. But he also understood that inside every man is a prince waiting to be awakened. So now we stand at a crossroads. One path leads to more of the same complaints, excuses, cycles. The other path? It leads to power, discipline, sovereignty. But it is steep, it is lonely, and it is worth it. Because once you awaken the prince inside you, you no longer beg for freedom. You become freedom. Part 3. The Awakened Strategist. There comes a moment in every journey when the illusion cracks. When the fog begins to lift, and the structures that once seemed permanent begin to wobble. If you've made it this far, you're no longer just a listener. You're a witness. Something inside you is stirring. And that stirring is dangerous to those who depend on your silence, your fear, your obedience. Machiavelli understood that real power isn't about domination, it's about leverage. The ability to see what others don't, to move when others freeze, to speak when others whisper. The poor stay poor not because they lack opportunities, but because they have not yet learned how to leverage themselves. Their time, their energy, their story, their pain. Everything can become power if you know how to use it. There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Machiavelli wrote, and yet that is exactly what you must do. You must become the leader of your own internal revolution. No banner, no army, just a sharpened mind, a relentless will, and a refusal to die the same person you were born as. Let's strip away the noise. Why do you think the poor are constantly sold entertainment, distraction, and outrage? Why is the algorithm feeding you dopamine while your soul starves? Why is your attention being harvested like a crop? Because attention is the new currency, and if they control it, they control you. The poor stay poor because they don't realize their attention is being weaponized against them. Ask yourself, what would happen if you reclaimed every second of your attention and redirected it toward your liberation? This is the essence of strategy, where your focus goes, your power flows. Most people waste it. They argue about politics they can't control, gossip about celebrities they'll never meet, obsess over problems that aren't even theirs. Meanwhile, their own life, their actual life, is left unattended, unguided, and ultimately unlived. Machiavelli would look at this and smile, not because he was cruel, but because he was honest. He would say, this is how it works. The masses are managed through distraction. The powerful stay powerful because they stay focused. And the poor stay poor because they are never taught how to think, only what to fear. But once you begin to think strategically, everything changes. You stop reacting. You start engineering. You become the architect of your time, your emotions, your energy. You stop asking, what should I do today? And start asking, what moves me forward? You stop living on default and start living on design. This is not about hustle culture. This is about agency, sovereignty, reclaiming your space in a world that was not built with you in mind. Because here's the final Machiavellian truth: the system is not broken. It works perfectly for the people it was designed to work for. Your job is not to fix it. Your job is to outgrow it. Let me ask you, what systems in your life are you unconsciously serving that were never designed to serve you? The education system, the job market, even your social circle, these may all be part of an ecosystem built on predictability. The poor are expected to be predictable. That's why they're told to fit in, not stand out, to follow instructions, not intuition. But the moment you stop being predictable, you become powerful. And unpredictable people disrupt systems. But disruption is not enough. You must also build discipline, build networks, build frameworks. While the poor are busy reacting to the latest crisis, the powerful are building the next decade. While you scroll, someone else is strategizing. While you complain, someone is preparing. The future belongs to the prepared. So what does preparation look like? It looks like waking up at 5 a.m. to master your craft. It looks like reading philosophy while others binge mediocrity. It looks like creating instead of consuming. It looks like saying no to comfort, to laziness, to the old self that keeps begging you to stay small. It looks like owning your pain, not escaping it. Because pain, when faced honestly, becomes clarity. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally, Machiavelli said. In other words, don't wait. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the world to be fair. Don't wait for your family to understand. Don't wait for the perfect time. The perfect time is a myth. The right time is now. You don't need to be rich to think like a strategist. You don't need a PhD to study power. You don't need permission to reclaim your mind. All you need is truth and the courage to live by it. Because once you start living by truth, everything false begins to fall away. The fake friends, the shallow goals, the distractions, the excuses. And here's the twist. The moment you stop chasing money and start chasing mastery, the money begins to follow. Not because you played their game, but because you built your own. The poor stay poor when they rely on the system. But the moment they build systems of their own ideas, businesses, platforms, communities, they begin to flip the script. Let me ask you one final question. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to escape poverty and started trying to become power? This is not a motivational slogan. This is a philosophical transformation. You are not a victim. You are not a label. You are not your past. You are a force of nature forgotten, maybe, but not broken. And the moment you remember who you are, the game is no longer the same. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to create tyrants. He wrote it to expose them, to reveal the truth behind the curtain, and to show you the levers of power. And now you've seen them. So the question is no longer, why do the poor stay poor? The real question is, will you stay asleep or will you rise? Because in the end, there are only two types of people in this world: those who are ruled and those who remember how to rule themselves. The choice is yours.